when a business owner is preparing to sell their business and they're getting themselves in the mindset of, I think it's time, I'm ready, I want to make the move. We talk a lot about the value drivers of driving their valuation, increasing the value, creating an organization that would seem valuable to the marketplace. And an organization that's highly automated, has great systems inside of it, definitely increases the value. I thought on this podcast, we would take a moment to talk about why are systems so important.
Just thinking about it, if you're owning a business and you run the business, why would you not want it to be automated? Why would you not want systems? You're owning a business to build short-term wealth and long-term wealth. And you don't want to be, in doing that, you don't want to work yourself to death. And so the more that is automated, the more that you could spend time outside of work, and when you're actually at work, we talk, working on the business versus working in the business, thinking strategically of where can we take the business, how can we grow the business. And so the more particularly mundane tasks are done over and over again, you really want those to be automated or systematized. And the two are sort of the same to the extent that you, the owner, don't have to do them yourself. And the key thing is that they're getting done, and they're getting done the right way and the same way each and every time. So of course automation is the best, but sometimes with automation you got to be careful is that if we can automate, if it's easy to automate, that means maybe the customer can do it themselves in an automatic fashion, or our competitors can do it. So sometimes it's better to build proprietary systems to automate, so we automate, you automate, but ours are better, and or systems where you have a process. And maybe it's just one person executing the system, or maybe it's multiple skilled people executing the system. That's even better because that's harder to replicate. So the goal really is to get things accomplished quickly and done the same way every time, so you yourself don't have to do it, and to build something that's a better mousetrap, that's better than can do it better than anyone else because we have better automation and or better systems.
So there's a common phrase that I hear amongst business owners, which is we have standard operating procedures. Right. Well, yeah, we're automated. We have SOPs, but there's somewhat of a dark side to SOPs, which is sometimes SOPs don't work, or they're written and not revisited. They're never optimized. Sometimes they just sit on a shelf and collect dust. So how do you get a SOP to come to life and actually work for your organization?
It's a constant evolution. I think you have to always revisit it. And just because something worked 6 months ago doesn't mean it works today. Something that worked a year ago. And I feel like there's always a little tweak that could be done to make it better, to make it more optimized, to maybe make it more automated. That as technology, you have to keep up with technology as well. Something that was not there a year ago is maybe here now, and you can pull the human aspect out of it and make it more automated. So there's a constant evolution happening, I think, in terms of SOPs.
AI is coming on fast right now, and a lot of business owners are trying to wrap their head around AI and integrating it into their systems, into their standard operating procedures, into every aspect of the business. Is there anything that you're seeing right now that business owners are actually successfully implementing?
Well, I think that AI can be used to write standard operating procedures. Particularly, I know you said a lot of business owners have them, a lot of them still don't even have SOPs. So I think the first thing is to use any of the AI tools to say, hey, create a standard operating procedure for this. And I think it could be the first SOP you create, or B, if you have one, you can compare the two and say, oh, I missed this, or hey, how can I make mine better? So I think that the current AI tools can definitely be used to help create and or improve existing SOPs.
Is there any correlation between a good SOP, standard operating procedure, and valuation from the outside market? When an outside company is looking at the value of an organization, what's the correlation between how they're valuing a company and how systemized it is?
It's a huge correlation. I mean, you're buying a company, and always when you're buying a company, you're questioning, should I build it or should I buy this company? When you buy a company, you're paying a premium, but you're also getting the speed because it's already built, it's already there. And so if the business is going to be super hard to run because there are no systems and no SOPs, you're more likely to build it, or you say, hey, I'll buy it, but at a much lower valuation. But if you can say, hey, this company is totally systematized, totally run on SOPs, everyone, it's very, very easy to run. If 10% of our staff left, we just hire them, put them right in the system, no problems at all, then the value is going to be so much higher because it's a better business, it's easier to run, it's just a more systematized process. So there's a huge correlation between valuation, and that's why it's that important to build these things.
Well, what about legacy systems? I know you're kind of touching upon this in regards to constantly revisiting, but there's plenty of organizations out there that are highly profitable. They look like the darling of for the bankers. They want to be shopped, but when you take a deeper dive, you realize that they're sitting on old legacy tech, old legacy CRMs, old legacy accounting systems. How do they start to wrap their head on like the hierarchy of importance? Where would you start to get them transformed digitally?
I would personally focus on what systems could lead to more revenues and profits. So if say like a legacy CRM system, if a newer CRM system had maybe some AI aspect to it that scored leads and allowed you to get more customers or convert more prospects into revenue, then I would do that type of system. A system that can bring in immediate profit and loss benefits. The other systems, let's say it's an HR system that is archaic, but it sort of does the job, then that would be a low, important, but a low priority. Also possibly thinking about potential acquisition, people who are going to acquire you, are they going to have systems that you would then take on? So maybe those systems are not as important, because when you get acquired, you're going to have to adhere to the systems of the parent company. So those are things to keep in mind when you're looking at upgrading legacy systems.
Is there a dark side to systems where maybe you have experience with this here, where you jump in too quickly to a piece of software and maybe try to onboard too quickly with something? Is there any kind of landmines when it comes to this?
Sure. I think that there is no replication for a human touch, human experience, and I think maybe people have tried to automate too much, and you could tell. You're getting automated responses from people versus a human reaching out, calling. We're losing those touch points, which I think is negatively affecting the human experience, for sure.
I went to the grocery store the other day, and it was all self-checkout.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know I worked here. It feels that way sometimes.
Yes.
So the dark side, we really just want to make sure that business owners are prepared to hit the market. And yes, we talk about valuation from an EBITDA standpoint. We talk about valuation from intellectual property. I love what you're saying about creating your own IP. I feel like business owners sometimes get a little nervous about creating their own IP, creating their own software, creating their own tech, because sometimes they're just not tech-minded or tech-driven. They're just good at building widgets or delivering a service, and that's it. So if someone feels like they do have a good idea to create their own internal systems, how do they approach that without spending too much money or having the scope be a runaway train?
There are marketplaces like Upwork where you can find contractors. So yes, if you're a business owner and you say, hey, it would be great if we were able to systemize this, have a technology that did this, usually those technologies are great technologies that you could probably not only use yourself, possibly even sell it to someone else on a licensing basis, but that's usually not their expertise on how to build that. Unfortunately, software costs have gone down dramatically, and what cost $1 million 5 years ago could possibly be done for $25,000 today. And there are contractors on places like Upwork, throughout the world, so you can get great inexpensive labor from thousands of miles away that speak English perfectly, that can get the job done. And so the only advice I would give is make sure you work with people that have tons of projects under their belt and have a 5-star rating, and ideally be able to say, hey, let's start by only completing a small portion of the technology first to make sure that the person's going to work out. But yeah, I think there's marketplaces today to create technology that just didn't exist even 10 years ago.
What about data? So let's talk about data a little bit, because I feel like data is maybe the cousin of this conversation, where we can create really good software systems with CRMs and getting data. So how does data correlate to valuation and driving the value up?
We're very big on metrics and KPIs, key performance indicators, and I think most successful companies that sell for the highest valuations are the same. That they're looking at their metrics, because it's a very systematic way to run a business. You say, what is our revenue, per prospect, revenue per employee? What is our conversion rates on new prospects, et cetera? What is our revenue per client? And so having those metrics, out there. So A, you need the data, and B, being able to constantly look at your metrics makes you a more professional organization. And it allows you to hire better because people that come into roles, they have very clear expectations. My expectation is based on my success in these metrics. And you can't improve what you can't measure in most cases. And so now that you have data and you're measuring things, people can improve performance. So generally your revenue goes up, your profits go up, and your business is more systematized. So all things that take your valuation higher and higher.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I think too, data really shows a potential buyer that you know what's going on in your business. It's kind of a, you look under the hood kind of thing, versus a company that's lacking in data may not really understand the pain points in the business or things that could be improved upon. But if you have the data, it's sort of the foundation of all of your decision making.
Is there anything else that comes to mind when you think automate everything? When you hear that term and you think about a business and you're like, okay, I want to get this thing so efficient and so profitable and reduce friction in all areas possible. What comes to mind when you hear that in today's environment?
I actually get scared because you can't automate everything. Yeah. So I know we tend to like to talk in language like everything. Yeah. I think that there is a law of diminishing returns at some point. So your improvement, at some point it probably plateaus and goes off because you can't automate everything. Comes back like you didn't know you were an employee at the supermarket. Right. At some point it's too much, and there has to be, you talk about personal touch and human touch, and at some point it just doesn't work. But automate, I would just change to automate as much as makes sense, as much as you can without hurting the customer experience, without hurting other things.
And the market will always determine.
Probably, yes.
If you over-automate, the market will most likely...
Your customers will tell you.
Yeah, they'll tell you, they'll backlash. So if there's a call to action as we round this out to business owners around this topic of getting their business systematized, automated, streamlined, and efficient so they can increase their valuation when the time of exit comes, what would that call to action be?
I would start by looking at the different aspects of your business. Right, usually there's the marketing sales aspect, there's the operations fulfillment aspect, looking at the key aspects of your business and thinking through, are we systematized? Are we doing it the same way every time? And what is sort of that leakage that's not going well? And looking at those areas and saying, which of these areas are we going to get the most bang for our buck, the most benefit by systematizing, and or can we automate this? And on one hand, anything that the business owner, him or herself, doesn't do is sort of automated, because that means that the new owner also doesn't have to worry about that. But really thinking about what is sort of the return on investment in the short term in terms of revenues and profits, and long term in terms of valuation of systematizing or automating each specific function.
What do those systems then allow us to do with the other parts of the business? Does it free up some of our intellect, some of our energy to think about, bigger things, or more? We can go on these corporate retreats and think about, the big ideas, because we're not in the minutia of in the business. So what do those systems then allow us to do on a bigger, greater, different kind of scale that kind of frees up our brain and energy?
What do those systems allow you to do as a business owner once you're in place and you have that freedom?
Oh, go for hikes, go for runs, spend more of the money we made. Yeah, I mean, it gives you some more time. Once you have to think about your business and think about how to grow your business versus constantly fighting fires. Because at some point, with the constantly fighting fires, you can't do it. At some point, you burn out. And you can't, and then you have competition as well, and they're not fighting fires if they're doing it right, and you're not going to compete against them because they're building these systems, and next thing you know, even if they're providing the same exact service, they're doing it at half the cost that you are, and they're going to spend more money on marketing because they're more profitable, and they're going to take you out of business.
You can't innovate. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
I think is key.
Yeah.
If Dave and I were constantly in the business and didn't have systems in place, we would never be able to think about the next big thing, the next product.
And we'd hate each other.
Yes.
No, because it's like, how much more friction is there when things are done not the same way every time, and then we'll be fighting between employees and managers because things are, you never know what the output's going to be.
Right. Yeah, because there's also human systems. I know we've been talking a lot about tech systems, But let's just, for a quick moment here as we round this out, talk about humans and getting humans to work in concert and orchestration and being efficient with just how they show up and do the things they do to keep quality control in place. So how do you keep humans in sync?
By, once again, having systems. Here's how we do it in our company. Here's the process, and then ideally having data and metrics to say, did they do that correctly? And so using those two together to make sure that the humans are doing things the proper way each and every time.
Yeah, and I think clearly defined roles and expectations laid out in a really clear way helps that as well.